Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with the Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast number 284 with the biggest freewheeling live streaming poetry podcast on the planet. I'm so glad you could spend your Sunday night with us. We have a wonderful guest. Keetje Kuipers is here. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been a continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. And I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet is all we ask, and it'd be much appreciated because that's the way that this stuff gets out there, and poetry always makes the world a better place, so you're doing your part by pushing those buttons. Now, before we start with our featured guest, we're going to take a look at our Poet Respond poet like we usually do. And Jeff Stumpo is here with a wonderful poem, Whalesong. So, hey, Jeff, how you doing? I'm doing great. It's so glad to have you on. And, I really enjoy this poem. It's one of those poems where it was one of the last poems I happened to read in the submissions. And there were some other poems I was sort of thinking about, and then bam, and it was like, that was it. Because the way that you moved through all this content in such an interesting way, you wove together three completely disparate stories and then tied it all together into one perfect little bow at the end. It's just a wonderful way of moving through a poem. What can you tell us about how the poem came to be?
Um, so three comments on that, and I'll try and keep them brief. One is I wrote the entire thing in about 20 minutes,
Oh, wow.
um, which was a deliberate choice on my part. That's including editing. Um, Two, I was to a certain extent channeling um, an old acquaintance from my slam days, Megan Thoma, who, more than any other poet I've ever met, was a genius at writing something completely off the wall that would make you weep by time she was done.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't like referring to any of her poems, but that's sort of the spirit of the thing. And the rest of it I've sort of been kind of figuring out as people have been emailing me about the poem over the course of the day.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting. How so?
and and so I think that what I'm supposed to say about that is I am often a cynic, but I am not a nihilist. And I am often an absurdist, but I am very vehemently not a nihilist. And there are people in the world always, but especially right now, who want to make other people feel that they do not matter, that they have no meaning. And so it is those of us who are creatives, we need to make meaning. Um, and so there are the Musks and the Trumps of the world where their ethos is move fast and break things. This is a response to that insofar as, yes, I too can be an agent of chaos, but at the end of it, I'm looking for the hope. I'm looking for the people who want to be kind to each other. I'm looking for the profundity out of that chaos. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, well, it definitely does. Before you read the poem, can you just explain the three different stories that were woven together here, in case people aren't familiar with all of them?
Yeah, so all three of these were reported last week. And so I'll do them in the order in which they appear in the poem. One is the Pentagon began flagging images for removal from websites that it has purview over. And these are the there's no good way about it, but they're anti-DEI measures. Big old scare quotes around that. Um, but they seem to have accidentally flagged the Enola Gay, like the bomber that carried the original atomic bomb to Hiroshima,
Mm-hmm.
because it has the word gay in it. And it's just like, I'm sorry that the algorithm is thinking for you. The second one is for the first time ever, humpback whales have been photographed having sex, and they were both male.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, oh, okay. Um, Given what we know about same-sex sex in the animal kingdom, that shouldn't be surprising, but it still caught a lot of people off guard. And the third one was in Montana. We're so desperately in need of good news when it comes to trans rights these days. And Zoe Zephyr and S.J. Howell gave impassioned speeches on the floor for two an anti-drag bill and an anti-trans bill that had come up for vote. And they were so convincing that they actually convinced enough people on the other side of the aisle to not just vote against it, but speak against it. And both of those bills were defeated.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, that's
yes,
really
we need
amazing.
that.
It's such a rarity, for anybody to cross over outside of their ideology these days. So that's a pretty amazing story in itself.
And so, you got to call attention to the hope. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot that, my kid is trans and I'm so worried for him, but like you got to look for the helpers too.
Yeah. Well, let's hear the story and hear how you wove all three of those together.
Okay. Whalesong. Of course, as a poet, I'm supposed to think words matter. I'm supposed to note the irony in the Pentagon algorithmically removing references to diversity from its websites and accidentally pulling photos of the Enola Gay, famous for dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and not, to be clear, fucking another B-29 in the ass like a humpback whale, like the first two humpback whales ever photographed having sex only for it to turn out they're both male, and the scientists, sometimes quoted in a news article and sometimes not, trying to emphasize that they don't know why, that the whales may be gay, or it may be that one is injured, or it may be that this is what whales do in the 70% of Earth most of us know next to nothing about because it is so watery and so deep. The point being that we can't ask the whales, what's up with the buttfuckery? Which is distinct from the buttfuckery of the Pentagon, which is metaphorical and, if I'm being honest, bordering on homophobic as a term, even a poem admonishing them for silencing the word gay, realizing I am not being a very good whale ally. Whale here being a metaphor for a trans state legislator in Montana speaking so eloquently against an anti-drag bill that the body politic flips. A cis straight mother reaching across the aisle, a couple dozen Republicans changing their votes to no. A reminder that maybe they just needed to see that there is so much ocean out there, and it is not just a place we cross on the way to drop a bomb, that we should be placing our heads in the water more often, listening for strange to us song.
Yeah, beautiful poem, and that's what we always hope for poets respond to be is complexifying the complexity of the world and showing it in all its glory. So thanks so much for sharing that, Jeff. It's been great seeing that poem and getting to share it with everybody today.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks. And once again, that was Jeff Stumpo with Whalesong, today's poem of the day on rattle.com. If you go to rattle.com, you'll notice the new website. Make sure you do click that rattle button. That's the new way because the share counter, they were charging us a lot on Facebook, to be honest, to use that appy. And so we're now doing rattles. So that's how we're going to rank the most popular poems so people can see the poems that are most effective. And if you want to do that, put in your part every time you go to rattle, give it up to one to 10 rattles. And that's how the new website works. Then you get that currently popular list at the bottom, and that's how that's generated. So do your part there too. Clicking stuff always helps. That's really just the gist. It's like a little finger movement. It's like 4 calories, I think, to move that finger. So just do that. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Keetje Kuipers. So sit tight, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Keetje Kuipers. Keetje is the author of 4 books of poems, all from BOA Editions, my favorite press in my hometown of Rochester, New York. Her most recent collection, Lonely Women Make Good Lovers, was the winner of the Isabella Gardner Award, and it was just recently released, or I guess it's going to be released really soon, to be more accurate about it. Her first book, Beautiful in the Mouth, was selected by Thomas Lux as the winner of the A. Poulin Jr. Poetry Prize in one of the top 10 debut poetry books of 2010 by Poets and Writers. Her first book also appeared in the top 10 on the Contemporary Poetry bestseller list. Her second collection, The Keys to the Jail, was a book club selection for the Rumpus, and her third book, All Its Charms, was a finalist for the Washington State Book Award and includes poems honored by publications in both the Pushcart Prize and the Best American Poetry Anthology. So great poet here. How you doing, Keetje?
I'm good. I'm excited. This is like the first time that, I mean, I've read these poems for audiences before, but this is the first time I'm like really reading from the book, even
Oh,
though
that's
it
really
doesn't
exciting.
officially, yeah, it doesn't officially come out till April 8th, but I'm excited to do my test run tonight.
Yeah, awesome. And available, for pre-order, go to keitjekuipers.com, just like it's spelled in below Keetje right there. So do you want to start out with a poem right away, Keetje?
Yeah, I was actually going to start with a different poem, but I was so struck by Jeff's reading that I thought I would start with one, maybe not in exactly the same vein, but you'll see why I thought it might be appropriate. This poem is called Bleeding. The world is trying to kill me. One news story, one sneeze, one bad president at a time. And maybe I don't care anymore if I'm dead. That's what I used to think when she put her fingers inside me. I don't care if I die. It felt so good. She loved my body when it stank, when I hadn't showered or brushed my teeth. She loved it in cheap hostels or in apartments haunted by a stranger's cigarette smoke. Beneath the pale, hushed sheets of her childhood bedroom. When I was ill, on drugs, the day after I'd gotten out of the hospital, and every week of every month for years, nothing stopping us. Her hands turned bright red with the blood of loving me. We'd put a towel down to sop up the mess, as if I'd died, as if she'd killed me. Our bodies collapsed on top of each other. Just one more murder-suicide. Everything but the gun, the knife, the man to complete the scene. And here we still are, despite every loaded weapon, pulling a red scarf from between my legs, and me mumbling, I could die, but still somehow alive.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poem, a love poem and capturing so many different things. It was Bleeding from Keitje's newest book, which is Lonely Women Make Good Lovers. And I always like to ask, because I just love to know how poets became poets. And so, there's different modes and different things. Were there some sort of, inciting moment where you knew this is for me? That's always fun to hear.
Yeah, I haven't talked about this moment in a long time, but when I was a senior in high school and I went to public school in Northern California, and we had not read any poetry K through 11th. And then suddenly in my English class in the senior year of high school, my English teacher told us all to go to the library or a bookstore and find a book of contemporary poetry and pick it up and read it and come in and talk to the class about it. And I went to the local bookstore in my town, Kepler's, in Menlo Park, and I went to the poetry section. And Kepler's is one of those great bookstores where the staff will write little, oh, this one is so great for these reasons, and hang it off the edge of the bookshelf for you. And there was one of those notes just below a book by Dorian Laux. And I pulled that book off the shelf and read her poem, Kissing,
Hmm.
and sat down on the carpet there in the bookstore and then just read the whole book, and then just read all the other books of Dorian's that were there on the shelf next to it. And I was all in from that point on.
Yeah. Do you think if you'd picked up a different book, like that, I love those moments, where your life just takes this swerve. And what if you'd picked up another book that didn't resonate with you? Do you think that you would still have ended up being a poet, or do you think it was Dorianne that, she's been a guest twice, such a wonderful person, and
Yeah.
and I think she's done that for so many people because her books are so accessible but so alive. And
Yeah.
so finding that in that day, I mean, what if
Yeah.
you opened up a book by, I don't know, I don't want to say anybody, but what if you opened up a boring book and do you think you'd still be a poet?
No, I think that Dorian, like, I think it was fate. Dorian and I have the same birthday, January
Hmm.
10th. And I took a circuitous path to poetry after that moment.
Hmm.
And so I was not an English major in college. I was a theater major. I moved to New York. I was an actress for a couple of years and worked a lot of odd jobs. And then I went to graduate school, but I chose to go to graduate school where Dorian was teaching. So I went to the University of Oregon. And so I sort of came full circle back to the moment on the floor of the bookstore. But that had to be, it had to be Dorian. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think fate is such an interesting thing to talk about when it comes to poetry and poets, because one of the things we're doing is sort of tapping into whatever mystery that is that draws us to things. And there's these mysterious connections that we have to, poets that we read and poets that read us. And there's this strange sort of, I don't know, deeper network of whatever it is, whatever the grand mystery of living and as a being in
Yeah.
this universe is, somehow there's a web that poetry creates unlike anything else. So I really love
Mhm.
hearing you say, calling it fate like that, because I believe it's probably true. Like we're drawn in some way. I think, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it just sometimes takes a little while for fate to work itself out.
Hmm.
But it kind of plants clues for us, and then we make our way there.
Yeah, and then you look back and you say, why didn't I get there sooner? Like they were all, the breadcrumbs were all right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem.
Yeah. Maybe I'll read another poem in which my wife makes an appearance, because that is also a story of fate. Um, we got together when we were in our 20s, and then we were together for a while, and then we took a 7-year break in which we were not in touch at all, and then we got back together and we got married. So that was fate planting its little breadcrumbs too. This poem is called In the Outdoor Shower with My Pregnant Wife. The old frisbee from Burger Chef, once red but faded now, the pale pink of my wife's widening areolas, lies upturned beneath the saltwater drip of our sagging beach towels. This world is full of objects succumbing to the gentle ebb of decay. But her body, loosening breasts and blue-veined thighs caught in a cascade of wet light as she turns beneath the showerhead's senseless spray, is not one of them. That low blooming shudder and heft at her hips can't compare to her belly button skin, stretched taut and thin, become the pale sail of a boat screaming into harbor. I am here to praise the way in which everything I have ever loved about her body is about to be ruined forever in the breaking open. Tonight, the wind will come up, turn the towels on the line into fat bells, churn the waves into a froth, drag the sand out and leave it where our toes can't touch. In the morning, the ocean will return to its languid sheet, but the beach will be strewn with the wreckage. I want already the body scarred by stretch marks, the extra flap of skin to hang soft at her waist, the feet that will never again be quite so small. I want to worship the body after the storm, the one I'm imagining already as she unfolds the straps from her shoulders and peels the suit off, her skin covered in those minute and glittering fragments of shell some people insist on calling sand.
And another beautiful poem, again, topics that come up frequently in this book. That was in the outdoor shower with my pregnant wife. And this is a book of love poems, but you have to say real love poems, and all their complexity and rawness and difficulty. A lot of that comes out in these poems. When you put together this manuscript, how did you realize you were writing about that topic? And are you the kind of poet that just like cranks out poems and then you look back, oh, I've got a bunch of poems and these ones sort of fit the themes that I'm talking about? Or do you know what you're writing as you're going through? How does the process of a book size work come
Yeah.
together for you?
I think with my first book, I was writing poems and I was sort of, at the end, kind of taking stock of what's in this book, what am I writing about, what appears here, and how do I organize it now? But with my second book, I started to see what I was writing about maybe a little bit sooner, not real soon, but before I finished all the books or finished all the poems for the book, I started to see like what kinds of themes I was working towards. And then with my third book, I knew really early on, just a handful of poems in. And with this book, I think probably one poem in, I knew what direction I was going in. But I never write towards, even once I think I know what the next book is going to be about, I never write intentionally towards it. It just sort of happens that all the poems then go there, go in that direction, go to that place. And I write poems and I think like, here's a poem that's not about what I thought this book was going to be about. And then, oh, wait, I look more closely. Oh, wait, this is a poem about vulnerability, humility, being wrong. Yeah. Oh, these were in here, and about love, sometimes familial, sometimes romantic, sometimes platonic. So I think, yeah, the poems in this book knew what they wanted to do pretty early on.
Yeah. Once you realize that, do you find it hard to get out of the way? And if you know that what you're sort of writing about, it's the death of creativity
Oh, yeah.
is to know and have a plan where you're going, because then you're not being creative anymore. You're being formulaic. And it's just, I've never been able to write a book where I've wanted to, where I know what it's about and where I try to go in a certain direction. Like I see this path. Oh, I can make this book. Especially, I love reading, like novels in verse and things that have a whole cohesive. And I don't know how that's done. So when you said for the last two books especially that you knew right away where it was. Is it difficult, like looking at the finish line in the distance and then still taking each step forward, or do you have no problem with that?
Well, I sort of don't choose to put any stock in it.
Hmm.
I say, oh, this is what it looks like. It's maybe the direction it's headed in, but I never write towards it, and I never, if I did, I'm just like you, Tim. Like there is no way. I can't even write a short series of poems in that sort of like project intentional way. It is just absolutely DOA for me if I try to
Hmm.
write like that. So yeah, so I do my best to like you're saying, stay out of my own way. And when I'm writing a new poem, I'm always curious and wondering like where it's going to go. And a lot of times in the first draft, which is, that initial impulse and where you have to follow the creative energy wherever it's going to take you, I don't know where it's going. But then in revision, I focus it and point it in the direction that I think the book is headed in. So if
Hmm.
I write a lyric about a tree, like I'm not thinking, how do I make this tree into my wife? Or how do I make this tree about friendship and love? But after I've written the draft of the poem, then I look at it and I think, what's in here that maybe hasn't identified itself yet?
Hmm.
And then at that point, I start working it in that direction. But I could never be like, ooh, a tree. Now I'll write a poem about X. Mm-mm.
Hmm. Yeah, but somehow, if you let it go, your subconscious like takes over. It's just a matter of
Yeah,
like, letting go of the wheel, and something happens if you have faith in it, maybe. Let's
that's
hear another poem.
okay. This one is also, I think, a love poem, but like you were saying, a complicated kind of love, which is really the only kind there is. The Rats. They come home with our daughter because there's no one at school to feed them on the weekends. They are mates, and like all true companions, they are devoted and they bite. We set their cage on the kitchen table and wait for the weekend to end, for our girl to fall asleep so we can talk about God, while the rats lick the silver ball that delivers the water one drop at a time. There are so many points on which you and I disagree. The value of a clean counter, the purpose of parent-teacher conferences, what warrants a good cry, or calling you a name so cruel I make myself whisper it through my teeth. God is the least of it. When I think I'm so angry I could hit you in the face, you turn yours to me with a look of disbelief. The rats, meanwhile, have turned up the volume. Tick, tick, says the silver ball as their teeth click against it, thirsty as ever, thirstier still at night when the darkness wakes them. And during the day, when they're curled together in their flannel hammock, head to tail, two furry apostrophes possessing nothing but each other, paws pressed together as if in prayer, to what gods do they prostrate themselves then? God of fidelity? God of forgiveness? I lied when I said I didn't believe. Who, even me, the coldest of hearts, could turn away from a sea parted, bread that multiplies to answer need, water transformed to the sweetest wine, the kind that tastes better for each year it's been left in the barrel.
Yeah. Another great ending to that poem. That was The Rats by Keetje Kuipers from her new book, Lonely Women Make Good Lovers, from BOA Press, which is out next month. Having love poems like these, it was really interesting for me to read because I happened to read with Katie, we were reading Lorca right before, and the love, Lorca is just all love poems, of course, but the love is such a different conception of love. And having a book on love and thinking about this and a real sort of flawed kind of love, what is your definition of love? Like, how do you think of it, and what makes a marriage work in your mind?
Mm-hmm. I just did an interview the other day, and the interviewer asked me, she said, Keetje, who taught you to love? And I just promptly burst into tears because I actually think that I'm not very good at it, and I don't really know how to do it very well. And I think in these poems, I'm kind of trying to work out, how do we love each other? How do we allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to love somebody else? To love the world, to let the world in. And I think, a marriage is a version of that, right? Like, we have to walk through the world in a way in which we're, not entirely permeable, but at the same time, not entirely defended either. And a marriage, you can't be entirely permeable in one of those either, right? You have to have your, not secrets, but the things that you protect for yourself. And so I think a marriage works by getting to know yourself. And that's, I think, also a lot of what the poems in this book are about. They're about getting to know the self of the past, the self of the present, and the self that's possible in the future. And in a marriage, it's all about making sure that what you're living today is laying the groundwork for a future together. So these poems are digging into that past, digging into that present, digging into those possibilities in the future. But I'm not very good at it. So thank God for poems, because otherwise I would have no way of figuring out how to move forward in a marriage.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up the world, because I was thinking too, and I don't know if it's just like everything that's surrounding everything nowadays,
Mhm.
but But reading the book, I was thinking about the way we have to find a way not to just love within a marriage, but love the entire world and each other. You know, we must love one another or die. But then at the same time, hell is other people. And so, do you think that kind of love, like a real complicated and difficult and marital relationship like that, can be expanded into a love for the world that works in the same complicated way? I mean, like, we have to be here. We get this one life together, you know, and it's a couple of people, or it's the entire world on one little planet, a little blue dot. Do you think about expanding that love outward and what that would mean?
Yeah, I think not only about permeability and vulnerability and allowing the world in or allowing one person in, but I think a lot too about the willingness to have the adventure. And the adventure is not all good. The adventure can be very ugly sometimes, but how else can you fully be in the world if you're not, in the adventure? And how else can you fully be in a partnership with someone if you're not in it for the whole adventure? So, yeah, I think about you take the good with the bad, and that's the only way you really get to have the good is
Hmm.
if you're willing to have all of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, really well said. Let's hear another poem.
This one is a little bit about letting the world in. This is called Pregnant Girl Creek. There's a girl leaned back against the chains of the bridge, clutching her belly through the thin rayon of her dress, like it's covering the underside of the sun, while her friend tells her to tilt her head right or left for the photos she's taking with a phone, each turn making a stripe of pink bangs flash across the girl's face like the fan of a bird's fragile wing. And what I mean is that she doesn't have much money, and also that I know her, which isn't possible since the girl I know is dead. Her children born and half grown already, nothing of her own shimmering left in this light-sieved moment, but the memory of her sweetness, which was true as this creek is cold, even at the end when she'd lost her kids and was ashamed of herself. And I think about how careless people like to say that it doesn't cost anything to be kind, but that some of us know the truth, which is that the price of cracking yourself open to the world long enough to feel love for a stranger, which is the same as feeling love for yourself, is dear, so that it hurts more than a little to lean in as I pass by and spend it all on this girl, telling her how pretty those pictures are going to be.
Yeah, another beautiful poem. That was Pregnant Girl Creek by Keetje Kuipers from her new book, Lonely Women Make the Best Lovers, or Make Good Lovers, sorry. I keep
Make
forgetting
it
if
the
it's good
best.
or
Who knows?
best. And so I have to glance back every time. But yeah, another beautiful poem. And the images really sing in all your work, which they always did. I think the first poem we published of yours was in 2008, I think. And I remember the images, that was prayer. And I remember how certain images stood out so much, even back then in the earlier work. And here the images too are really, it's sort of like, there's a way that your poems seem to like leap like stepping stones from image to image in a way that's really beautiful. How do you how does that come to you in a poem? Like, as you sit down to write, do you see the poem and you're painting that with words? How do the images come to you, or do they come after the fact? How does imagery work for you in a poem?
Yeah, I think it's changed somewhat over time. I used to be and I still love to recommend this as a way of practicing poetry, even though it's less the way I work now. But for a long time, I always thought of myself as like carrying a little satchel around with me, and I was just putting images into it. And I didn't know when I would use them, and I didn't know, how they would become useful to me at some point, but I was just putting those in. And sometimes that meant writing, jotting them down in a notebook. And sometimes it just meant like allowing them to catch in the net of my mind and be held there for however long it took. I had a poem in my first first book that is full of images of New York City. And I had written that string of images down in a writing notebook I carried around in my bag with me. And I thought, I wrote them down in the winter, and I thought, I don't know when or how I'll use these in a poem, but I'm sure they'll come in handy at some point. And then it was maybe 9 months later that I had an experience in my life and I wanted to write about it. And I realized these images were going to be the doorway that was going to open to allow me to write that poem. As a lot of times there are the things of the world that, like, oh, I want to describe that bunch of grapes, but why? Who cares? It's a bunch of grapes. Or, oh, I want to write about this really challenging experience that I'm having with my wife, but who cares? It's me and my wife having a argument, right? So how do I get those things to go together? How can one help the other? So sometimes it's making a discovery of how the things I've collected in my satchel might be useful tools. But I'm thinking about poems that I've written more recently. And the way I work now is that a lot of times I do all my writing when I'm on a residency. I have two kids, 12 and 5 years old, and my brain is less able to work as a net than it used to be. And my satchel, I think, has some holes in it. So a lot of times I'm jotting things down in notebooks, and then I go on a residency and I work really intensively and for 2 weeks, because that's as long as I can be gone, and before everything falls apart at home. So I go for 2 weeks, and I take that stuff out of the notebook and I make something of it. And while I'm on residency wherever I am, in Virginia, in Massachusetts, in Wyoming, wherever that residency happens to be, I'm also just actively collecting images, as quickly as I can. But again, it's so much of it is the subconscious work, and then the intentionality of the image use happens after the original impulse of sort of following, like, oh, I found this dead buck when I was taking a hike while I was on a residency. I'm gonna just describe it, and I'm gonna see where that description takes me. So yeah, it's just allowing all the things that I collect to filter into the poems as much as possible. And I used to feel like, oh, this image doesn't go with that one. I have to be careful. I can't have these two things rubbing up against each other that don't belong. And I don't feel that way anymore. I now feel that it's really important to have things not great against each other, but maybe have like a little bit of roughness when they're brushing against each other in a poem. And I think of them as like the rumble strips in the poem. It's the moment where you sort of jolt the reader a little bit, give them a little shake, remind them, we're here and it's difficult. And so now I like to have the images work, I think, in more unexpected ways, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned residencies, and I don't know if this is a false memory, but I think I remember you mentioning, like, in a cover letter, maybe in 2008 or something, that you went on like a retreat, like a residency that was completely isolated, like in Wyoming, and you were like in a cabin for like 3 months just by yourself. Is that true, or is that just a false memory, or I'm thinking of somebody else? And because
No,
I've
you
had
have
that
great, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I've
you
had
have
that like
great
as this
memory.
fantasy. Every time I'm just sick of life, I'm like, oh, what was that residency that Keetje went on where she was like
Yeah.
gone for 3 months and didn't see anybody? So,
No,
so
it
is
was,
that
yeah.
true? And what was that like, if so?
Yeah, no, that's incredible. You work with so many writers that I'm really impressed that you remember that. It was actually 7 months,
Oh, wow.
and it
Yeah.
was a cabin totally off the grid, 2 hours down a dirt road from the nearest town, in a wilderness area in Southern Oregon on the Rogue River, so part of the Rogue River Wilderness Area. And it's called the Marjorie Davis Boyden Wilderness Writing Residency. And that was where I wrote my first book, and that was in 2007. So yeah, I probably did mention it in a cover letter in 2008.
Well, so what was that like to be, I mean, that isolated with just poetry? I mean, that first book is, it's just amazing. Were you, I don't know, what was the experience like being that
Mhm.
isolated for that long?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, other than having kids, the most profound and important experience of my life, and I think it will probably stay that way for a long time. And that was, I mean, yeah, that was almost 20 years ago. I had sort of lied a little bit in my application. I mean, maybe not lied, stretched the truth, said that I was more outdoorsy and capable than I actually was. I mean, I live in Montana and I grew up in the West and I've been fly fishing since I was 10. And, I do a lot of, backpacking and things like that. But I didn't really, know my way around like a gun or a chainsaw, or anything like that. And so when I found out that I got the residency, I was pretty stunned and a little freaked out. But I did it anyways, and it was wonderful to discover that so many things that I had been afraid of were things that I did not need to be afraid of, that I didn't need to be afraid of loneliness, that I didn't need to be afraid of my own company, that I didn't need to be afraid of a chainsaw, that I didn't need to be, afraid of the woods and at night, all these things that I felt, sort of deeply and instinctively disturbed by.
Mhm.
And I think what I loved the most about it, especially related to writing and the way it influenced my writing, was that I never had to finish anything because all I had was time. So I would go out on the porch with a cup of coffee, planning to read somebody's book of poems, and I'd sit down and I'd read a couple, and then I'd hear a rustle in the leaves, and I would go and look, and it would be a bunch of quail rustling through some leaves, and I'd think, oh, great, I want to go and take a closer look at those. And so I would go and look for the binoculars and then discover that there was a bug identification book next to the binoculars on the bookshelf. And I'd flip it open and look at this green beetle and suddenly be like, oh, I got to write a beetle poem right now. And then just sit down and start writing. So it was really like, I. I could, again, like speaking about letting the world in, sometimes we don't have time to let the world in, or we feel like we don't have time to let the world
Mhm.
in. And all I had there was the ability to let it in, at any moment in any direction. And I think there was that allowed me to have a kind of wildness in my poems. And with my new book, I wanted to get back to that wildness because my second book and my third book were much more, I love those books too, but they're much more controlled and and tight. And I wanted this new book to be like my first book, and then I wanted it to be leggy and dangerous and free.
Hmm. Yeah, well, it definitely is. Let's hear another poem from it.
Um, this one is called Googling My Ex. Not because I'm still in love with him or because I wish him ill, not to smirk by the insomniac's light, scrolling through photos to learn if he's lost all his hair or if his wife has managed to pull a child from the flawless silk top hat of her womb. I do it to see him beyond that red truck he drove, or the way I thought I looked climbing into it, past the stories of his dead father and the fantasies I liked to make of holding that grown boy's weeping face. I look now as I never could back then, when I too wished so badly for one person in the world to see me for myself. I look now to witness him living a life, a beautiful one, we never could have imagined together.
Yeah, that was Googling my ex, an experience that I think a lot of people can relate to. um, yeah, and that was from, of course, Keitje's new book, Lonely Women Make Good Lovers. Um, the title poem from the book, which we haven't read yet, but why did you choose that as the title, and how and why lonely women make like answer that question? Why do lonely women make good lovers?
So, so the title is actually the title of a old country song, and one day I was driving around town, and I like to listen to the country station, and there's a country station in Missoula called The Ranch, and it plays like some newer country, but it also plays just like a lot of old oldies but goodies. And I had never heard this song before, and it came on, and I thought, oh, lonely women make good lovers. Okay. So I listened more closely, and it's a song about how women who are lonely are so desperate that they in bed they are grateful. And and I thought, oh man, I gotta write a poem about being lonely in bed, that maybe tells a different story of that experience, because the story that this male country singer is telling in the song is maybe not my experience of being a lonely woman in a bed. And so that's where it came from. And then when I was thinking about the what I would use for the title of the book, I was on a residency when I was putting this manuscript together, and I was there with my friend Esther Lynn, who also has a fantastic book called Cold Thief coming out this spring. And she had read the manuscript, and I said to her, I said, maybe, maybe I'll call it Good Lovers, maybe I'll call it Lonely Women. She says, no, you got to do the whole thing. You got to have that whole title on there. And as soon as she gave me permission to do that, I knew it was what I wanted for the book, because I wanted lovers, but I also wanted loneliness, and I wanted women in there. I wanted all of it. And I think it fits the book pretty well.
Yeah. Well, let's have you read that poem in just a minute. But what about what goes into a good title? I think your books have good titles. And is there something that you look for that makes a title work?
Well, my writing group teases me because I write a lot of occasionals. So I write a lot of, after the farmer's market, I make a salad niçoise, or at the minor league baseball game, you say this to me, or, at 40, this happens with Garbo and Palm Springs, all these sort at my daughter's riding lesson. I'm looking at, the day after your mom dies, I go to see the witches, like all these titles that are sort of setting us up and getting some of the exposition out of the way. And that's a lot of times what I'm trying to do with my titles, which is I don't necessarily think I'm looking for that in other people's titles of their poems. But for me, it's really helpful to get some of that exposition out of the way, and then just be able to dive into the poem and its music and its moment and whatever is happening, without having to double back and make sure everybody knows where we are and what we're doing. I can kind of, set the stage, and then not have to worry about it in the poem. So that's on my mind a lot. I'm looking at these other titles in here. I kind of love a sexy title. My first book, Beautiful in the Mouth. I like something that is that's gonna be you know, a little bit of a thrill, maybe. I want people to think like, okay, I should pay attention. This person is going to tell me something that I need to hear, something that maybe I not even need to hear, but I need to feel. So I think I'm looking for that in a title too.
Yeah. Well said. Let's read that poem, the title poem next. But
Yeah.
before we do, I should say, if anybody has any questions for Keetje, please leave them in the chat windows on either Facebook or YouTube. Those are the two I'm watching, and I'm happy to pass anything along. It helps if you put question, just the word question in bold, so I can actually see it as I scroll back up through all the comments. And also, if you haven't clicked the like button yet, there's always twice as many people watching live as have clicked like. And then if I say this, you click like, and because you're reminded. So click like if you would, if you haven't yet, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or X. So let's hear that title poem, Keetje.
Lonely women make good lovers, sings the man on the country station. But that's not how I remember loneliness. Mostly too drunk to feel anyone's pleasure. And the next morning, that pitiful kinship of distance. Except for the night he couldn't finish it. Not in the meadow, not in his truck. Until finally we stumbled through the blue light of his shared living room, because at the least he needed some place to put my hunger to bed. In the morning he thought to make the misadventure right, while I looked out the window, examining the scars on the glass. Bird shit, a feather, unbroken blue sky. The same way I look down at my hands now. Everything's so plain, even my pain, which I'd thought anyone could see.
Yes, it's another poem. That was the title poem, Lonely Women Make Good Lovers, from the new book by Keetje Kuipers. Um, in that poem, there are a few poems in the book. It feels, there's always this assumption that the I is me, in poems, and you try to bat that out of your head, but you can't help it. I mean, that's just language. That's what it does, and it feels like some poems are written more in persona, and some poems are you. And so I'm wondering if there's an amalgam of that. Like, how do you approach the I when you're using the I in a poem, and do you feel like it's always you in some way, some aspect of you, or how does that work for you?
Yeah. Well, I think of the I in poems as being a distilled version of myself or a piece or slice of myself that I'm gonna zero in on and block the rest of my person out. Um, and in that way, it does become persona in some ways, right? Even if everything I say in the poem is true, right? Even if everything that happens in the poem really happened to me, like in this poem. But yeah, I'm distilling, I'm getting down to the essence of myself in that moment, myself in that story, which is just a slice of myself, right? Um, and that's what I love about poems, and that's what I hate about writing nonfiction. And I'm writing a lot of nonfiction these days because I'm writing essays that sort of go with this book, and and I hate it because I find myself writing things, and then later I go back and I read over it and I go, oh, that's not. I mean, that's not quite true.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have this feeling, which I think is probably wrong in nonfiction. It probably, you know, memoirists who are practiced at that kind of work, they probably have, a similar kind of idea about like, telling a portion of the story. But I always feel like in nonfiction, I have to tell the whole thing. And of course, it's not possible to tell the whole thing because the whole thing is too complicated. The whole person is too complicated. And I think in a book of poems, when you're writing the way that I do, and my work is very autobiographical. So in a book of poems, if somebody reads that, they're going to see me over the course of the book. But in a single poem, just a tiny piece, just a little slice, just a little bit of distilled. Whereas when I'm working on a nonfiction essay or piece of memoir, I'm feeling like I have to get it all into that one piece, which is why I hate doing it, because I just feel it feels untrue no matter what. Whereas my poems, even if they're just a slice, or even if I am, changing a little thing here, okay, I'm going to mention a story that my brother's wife's cousin told me, but I don't want to say it was my brother's wife's cousin who told me this. So in the poem, it's just my brother who tells me the story. Even if I'm changing little things like that, it feels 100% true,
Mm-hmm.
right? It feels totally and completely honest. And, Richard Hugo said you owe the truth nothing, you owe the poem everything. But I think if you're doubling down on the poem, then what you're doing is you are telling the truth. And there are those poems that ring false, not because they're more factually untrue than another poem, but because the poet isn't being faithful to what the poem wants. And so that's always my goal, is to tell the poem's truth. Um, but in memoir, I don't know what truth is. It's too complicated for me.
So the creative nonfiction that you're doing is memoir, or is it a topic based too? What are those pieces like? I'm not familiar with that. What you're doing?
I just had a piece come out in Dame magazine online, and it was about when my wife and I lived in Alabama, how we stopped touching in public for the 4 years that we lived there. 'Cause we were so afraid of being seen, and of course, we were seen for what we were. A queer couple all the time, but we were afraid that if somehow we were part of making ourselves be seen, that it would be dangerous.
Hmm.
And I write about the way in which that danger then entered our home, and
Hmm.
that self-censorship of touch entered our private life as well, right? Like you can't be a certain way with your partner in public and then go home and think that you can be another way,
Hmm.
right? It enters your life. So I wrote about that, but I also have another essay. I have a number of essays about my decision to become a single mother by choice, about how I chose a sperm donor, what it was like, merging my life with my wife's life when I had a child.
Mhm.
Um, and for instance, I in one of those essays I wrote about going to my wife's families for Thanksgiving, and they have a giant Thanksgiving celebration every year with like 35, 40 family members. And I remember, and I wrote about remembering going when I was really pregnant and feeling like this family wanted my child and wanted me to be part of their family, and we weren't married yet, and feeling like, no, this is mine, and they all wanted to devour me like a giant, Thanksgiving turkey. And I wrote that scene and I remembered that scene really clearly. And then when I was revising the essay, I realized that I had not been at their house for Thanksgiving, that I had been too pregnant to travel, that I hadn't
Mhm.
flown from Alabama to Pennsylvania that year, and that there was no way that that had ever happened, and that I had not made it up, but imagined it, and imagined it in such detail that I believed that it was true. And so, yeah, as I was saying, I can't write nonfiction about myself. It it goes off the rails pretty fast.
Yeah, well, that is fascinating the way we confabulate and just believe that the narratives that we put up, whether it's about other people, I mean, there's people that just, you see them in one way and it's just not even true. And yet that's the
Yeah.
world that they live in. It's like multiple watching all different movies on the same screen sometimes. It's really fascinating the way the world can work like that.
Yeah.
And those topics are fascinating. That Alabama story. Why
Mhm.
is that an essay and not a poem? Is there a reason that it went in that direction? Because that seems like it could be a book, and it's a poet, so you'd think it could come out as a book. But what made you want to put that down as an essay?
I have never thought about that before. I I think, I said earlier, like one of the reasons that I write is I'm trying to figure out how to let the world in, how to let my wife in, how to love, how to be someone who deserves love in return, um, all of those things. But I think there are other things that I'm trying to work out and figure out that have less to do with maybe how I move forward in the world, and more to do with how I'm reckoning with some elements of the past. And my poems do that too, but sometimes they just, if I'm writing about who I was, I need more space to stack those layers and to see what they look like when they're laid on top of each other.
Mhm.
And I love writing poems that I mean, a lot of the poems in this book, like that title poem, "Lonely Women Make Great Lovers." I mean, I'm writing about experiences that I had 20 years ago. I read about friendships from 20 years ago that are lost to me now. So I do a lot of reflecting and looking back. But I think sometimes those pieces that I'm looking back on, I have more of a handle on. And that's how they end up in a poem. But if it's something that I'm still trying to figure out, yeah, I need to lay it out in a much bigger quilt.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Then we've got two more poems to read if I was counting right. Do you want to do one? Then we'll do some of these great questions we've got, and then the last one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna do this last one. Um, if I can find it. Uh, yeah. I'm gonna do "My Mother Bought Me a Scarf" because we're talking about how we see other people and how we see ourselves and how we fit those pieces together, ourselves in the world and others in the world. Um, and I think of this as sort of a quieter poem, but a lot of the themes in the book, not just vulnerability and love, but also humility and the idea that we can never really know each other. My mother bought me a scarf. It came from a catalog. I opened the plastic bag inside the plastic bag, and out tumbled fabric, fine as flesh. From the hem hung a thread I thought to free with one swift tug, But this was like pulling a river from the sea. Strand of hair, long and black and woven all its shimmering length. Of course, I wondered who she was. I read the tag and closed my eyes until someone nearly appeared to me. Let's not pretend I knew her life. I wore the scarf most days. As for the river, I didn't know what to do with what I'd found, so I threw it away.
Yeah, another great last line in that poem. That was, my mother bought me a scarf. And that last line, as for the river, I didn't know what to do with what I'd found, so I threw it away. And there's something so simple and profound in a line like that, which is often, there's sort of a simple, profound leap at the end of your poems, and I wonder how you come to that spot where it's the right ending, because there's just a way that a lot of the poems just click in that way that's very satisfying. So how do you find that? Do you write until you find the ending, I guess I'm asking, or do you, how do you find that, your way to that click that you get?
I think that I have a sense for when I'm getting close to the end of the poem. And I write a lot of poems that aren't necessarily sonnets. I write sonnets too, but I write a lot of poems that aren't necessarily sonnets, but are about the size of one. And that poem that I just read is the size of a sonnet. And so I can sort of tell rhetorically when I'm getting to the point where the poem is wrapping itself up. And I think the thing that I ask myself when I'm getting close to the end of a poem is, have I really said the thing that scares me the most? Have I really gone to the place that makes me feel most embarrassed for myself, most ashamed of how I fail the world and how my empathy fails the world and how my reaching and my longing to connect is never quite enough? Have I said it yet?
Hmm.
And then I say it.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. A great way to look at it. Let's go to a question Matthew Joseph wants to know. And this is something that I saw this earlier, so I didn't ask. I saved it from Matthew. But Matthew wants to know, at one point, other than publication, do you share your writing with your wife? And do you ask her for input? And so, I mean, that's sort of the question that's begged in a book like this, is like, what does she think of these poems that are about your marriage?
No, I don't. I don't. She is not a writer. She's a reader. She's a reader and she is such a wonderful, supportive fan of me and my work. But I don't show my work to her as I'm writing it, not for any particular reason. I'm not afraid to show her my work. I'm not thinking like, oh, this isn't going to go well. In fact, I forget that I haven't shown her my work. So when the galleys for this book showed up, I thought, oh shit, I need to show this to her before everyone else sees it. She's got to be in the loop first. So no, I don't get feedback from her. I don't get permission. She understands that she's along for the wild ride that is working through my life and our life together on the page. But she also, we've had a lot of conversations with this book in particular and with the essays that I'm writing, which feels, oh, the essays feel more dangerous to both of us, I think. But we've had a lot of conversations about the way, again, about truth and what's true. And she reads these poems and she thinks, yes, all of these are true. This is the way it happened, and we have these feelings about it. And yet there's so much privacy that it's not possible to share on the page. Even if I wanted, like I was saying, to get all of it in there, I couldn't possibly, right? And I think that's comforting to her, knowing that I am limited in my ability to share, so that there's still plenty left that's just ours.
Now that's really interesting to think about. Is a lot of times it is writers that are a couple together, and so they kind of know the game, as it were. And so people that aren't, it's interesting to hear that connection, how it functions. Another question: Shape of Soup wanted to go back to the topic of love, and they say love to me is at its core actualized empathy, the action of empathy. I get the impression you agree that this helps you see it in yourself and the world.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think in this book, I use the word when I'm talking about it, I think I use compassion, maybe more than empathy, but I'm talking about empathy too, for sure. And I'm really interested in examining its limits and how far it can reach, and the ways in which it's so important to do the reaching of empathy and compassion, despite knowing how limited we are as individuals to reach all the way with that. We can never really enter someone else's experience. We can never know someone else fully, but love, whether it's a person that we're in a partnership with or the world, is, yes, about the reaching, about the seeking, about, I like the way you said that, actualized empathy, right? Living our empathy rather than just sort of feeling it. But yeah, putting it into action. So I want to know, in the world and in my life and in poems, like, what does it look like to try to actualize it as much as I possibly can and not be afraid of bumping up against my limits and its limits when I put it into practice.
Yeah, really well said. We're about out of time. Let's do one last poem, Keetje.
Oh, sure. Okay. Um, here's the only one I didn't that I was planning to read that I didn't read for you guys tonight. And um, yeah, I won't say anything else about it. Um, Poikilothermic. We take our chairs out into the sun, where the small poodle can run laps round the bougainvillea or curl in the bowl made between the old lady's bathrobed knees. I sit across from her as she strokes its furred skull with her freckled hands. She is delighted to tell me how the scorpion, tiny, genius creature, glittering black bracelet splayed open against the yellow wall, kills itself. And I am delighted to listen, though there was a time I wouldn't have wanted to learn anything about fear from another woman. As a child, she once saw a man catch a scorpion in a jar. He lit a match, put flame to a branch he then brought as close as he could to the glass. The girl inside the woman can remember seeing the scorpion's tail fly up to sting its own head, saving itself from a fire it could only feel as fear's shimmering heat. But as much as she remembers this, it isn't true. Beyond the stone wall, a marching band parades through the narrow street, firecrackers invisibly punctuating the air above her voice. I too have known untouchable fire and contracted in response. My second year in that city beside the sea, I did not want to die. And yet, from the outside, I must have looked like a woman with a dagger raised over her own blazing head.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful poem. That was poikilothermic, which I don't know what that means. What is the
It's a
definition of
creature,
that?
it's any kind of creature that contracts when it experiences intense heat, and not not consciously making the choice to pull itself in, but its body just um, contracts of its own accord, and that is true for scorpions.
Oh, very interesting. Well, thanks so much for sharing that and for being a guest today, Keetje. It's been so fun exploring this book and talking about these great topics too. Thanks for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I loved it, Tim.
Yeah, thanks. And once again, that was Keetje Kuipers. You can find all of her work, the 4 books of poetry. I'm sure the essays are up there too, all that sort of stuff, including the new one, which was Lonely Women Make Good Lovers, at her website, Keetje Kuipers, like it's spelled on the screen if you're watching, but for those just listening, it's KeetjeKuipers.com, KeetjeKuipers.com. And that is going to be, that's going to wrap up the regular portion of the show for tonight. Now we're going to go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week is the following, or was the following. right here. Write a poem about a time that you carried more than you ever thought possible and include a reference to temperature. That was the prompt for this week. Write a poem about a time that you carried more than you ever thought possible and include a reference to temperature. Now, keep in mind, the max time on the camera should be about 3 minutes as you share these poems. It's a 1 page max, but if it's like a shorter version, feel free to sort of introduce it a little bit. If it's a longer poem, just dive in because we want to make sure we get to everybody as quickly as possible. And we're going to move on to the prompt lines. So if you just want to enjoy the poem, like you are, please do just sit tight right where you are and watch on YouTube or Facebook. But if you want to share a poem, and only if you want to share a poem, jump on the Zoom link right now. I'm about to paste it into Facebook and YouTube, and then you can join us and share that poem, or just sit tight and watch them, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. We are going to, one little program note, we're going to take a little pause after we talk to Bree because there's something going on. I got to make a phone call that's important, and it happened right in the middle of the show.
Yes, it did.
But we're going to, I think what we're going to do, we're talk to Bree, who is...
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, oops. Who is the prompt poet of the month.
Yes.
And then we'll go for a break, but you can just hang out maybe like for 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll come back to do the actual
when
open
we can.
lines.
And no pressure if you leave. We'll understand. Too.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, but first, we're going to talk to Breonne, who is the prompt poet of the month this week. Let's see.
So there were a lot of really good poems this month. I want to say, first of all, I wrote a few more personalized rejections because there were so many poems that I felt like really deserved it. So thanks to everybody who submitted. And there were, it was really fun seeing where everyone went with the prompts this month. And even in the shortest month, we had so many great poems. So that was exciting too. This poem in particular, I felt very transported by. So I'm really excited for other people to get to hear it. And also it's written by a woman who has been lurking a little bit, I think it's fair to say. And this has made her make her first appearance on the prompt lines. So I'm particularly glad that Bree is with us.
Yeah. So, hey, Breonne, how you doing?
Hi. Yes, this is my first appearance. I usually avoid public speaking because I get kind of nervous. But no, I'm happy to be here with all of you guys. So many of you have inspired me in my poetry. So I just really appreciate being here.
Oh, great.
Oh, yeah, well, great. Well, thanks so much for being here and sharing this poem. So which prompt was it after?
Oh,
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's hear from you. I talk all the time.
Yeah, it was the memory prompt that had a little dialogue in it, and it really brought me back to this memory I have that my mom swears I was too little to remember, but I remember it so vividly, and it really brought me back there. And I just remember everything that was going on in that moment, and that led down other trails. And in a way, I kind of wrote this poem backwards, like from the thought of the memory. And then, yeah.
That's really interesting. And you also said it was partially inspired by the ekphrastic challenge, which was a really cool note to see too. So you kind of double prompted yourself here.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't get the ekphrastic picture out of my head while I was thinking about this. So I was like, something's going on here, and it came together, I guess, and there was a little marriage of it. And yeah.
Well, great. Well, would you go ahead and read it for us? I can't wait for people to get to hear it.
Absolutely. Pangea in her. It's every writer's favorite smell, like Barnes and Noble or hole-in-the-wall used bookstores. Paper and pages wedged in between whiffs of nostalgia, dust moths and memories, the faint woody smell of the distant forest it came from. Even new books smell like the old days and somewhere else. Another time, another place. I remember my library card, my mother encouraging me to go, but then feeling frustrated when I wouldn't want to leave. I wanted to be like Matilda, make my own pancakes, calculate impossible math problems in my head, and it seemed that reading was clearly the answer to learning telekinesis. I remember my toddlerhood, sitting butterfly legs on a tattered blanket, waiting to watch fireworks in a crowded park on the 4th of July. A group of teenagers were throwing hostess ding-dongs at each other, and not only did I want one, but I saw the way one of the girls laughed at the boys in slow motion, her straight hair closed like curtains on her face, as she twisted her upper body away, pretending not to like it, pretending to be annoyed. Her pink tank top lifting above her hip bones as her unzipped hoodie slipped from her shoulder, revealing her bare skin like drifting continents among an ocean of clothes that begged to be pulled. When a little metallic flying saucer fell directly in my cross-legged lap. She can have it, the girl told my parents. But how I knew I made it happen with a yearning, how I knew that somehow Matilda summoning desserts was actually about me, and how I knew that one day I would flirt with boys and fall in love, and that the smell of books and wordy forests would sing to me like summer rain, your favorite thing, your favorite thing.
Yeah, beautiful. Such beautiful descriptions in that poem and taking us back to that time.
Sorry, my volume went off.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. I think we're still muted.
Oh,
that
sorry.
was not you. That was us. You're technically proficient more than us already.
Yeah, but I say, such beautiful lines in that poem, Bree, and such great details.
Yeah.
It just really takes us back to the spot. Everyone's saying beautiful right now, and it really is.
It really, it felt so transportive. Like I really felt like I was right there with you and like I knew you, which was of course what the best poems do. And then while this didn't influence me picking the poem, I had to say that scene with Matilda and the pancakes is like my favorite movie scene of all time.
Same.
And that "Send Me on My Way" song by Rusted Root that I think is playing is like my anthem for like I'm going to empower myself. So I really love that.
Yeah, and I should say, Katie did pull me aside and said, "Do I love this poem just because I love Matilda?"
I did too much because I love it. I love it so much, but I love Matilda.
Well, I've never seen Matilda, but this is a great poem anyway.
So this is great. So we'll get to also watch Matilda thanks to your poem now because Tim needs to see it.
You have to. It's so good. It is magical. It is perfect. I did almost. I was thinking about how I could incorporate the "On My Way" song, but it wasn't gonna go in there, so it didn't fit.
All right, everybody will just have to listen to the song while they read your poem. Maybe I think that'll solve the problem. But thanks so much for writing and for submitting your poems and everything, and for joining us live for the first time. We really hope that you'll come back. You know, having gotten the first appearance, a smashing success out of the way. Hope you'll join us again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bree. Yeah, take care. Yeah, once again, that was Breonne Stiglitz, the prompt poet of the month for this week. That poem's going to be premiered on rattle.com on Tuesday is the poem of the day. If you don't subscribe to the poem of the day by email, please do sign up for that. You can find it at the bottom of any page in our footer there. Sign up for the poem of the day. You'll get these poems and many more in your inbox. Now, we're going to take a quick break. Like I said,
Quick might slightly overstate
Okay,
it.
not a quick break. A prolonged break. We're going to take maybe, a good chunk of minutes. If you want to stick around, please
We're coming
do.
back. Charlotte might come in and try to lead it while we're gone. We'll see.
We'll see
No,
what
I'm just
happens.
kidding.
But I do got to make an important
Yeah,
phone
we
call.
do. Okay.
So I'm going to put up the thing. I'm going to, meet you. Everybody who wants to stick around, just hang out in the Zoom. I'll put up the bumper music, and we'll see when we can get back.
We'll see how weird the music gets.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
It does get weird. Okay.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Enjoy the weirdness. Okay. Bye. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience through the longest break in Prompt Lines history.
Yeah.
I'm here with our Prompt Poems editor, Katie. I got to back up a little bit. I'm like,
You're very much here. You're so here. You're like going to pop through the
okay.
screen there.
Anyway, we're here with our Prompt Poems editor, our associate editor, and my wife, Katie
Yay.
Yeah, thanks. We had to deal with some personal stuff going on, but really glad we could, and that everybody's still here.
Yeah.
The whole chat room. If you're not part of the last thing I heard was Rod saying that it was like the most welcoming poetry chat around and inclusive, and I love that it feels that way. If you're just watching and you're not part of the Zoom and not sharing poems, like there's nothing to be afraid of. Like share poems, come on and join the fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks everybody for staying around. We got just the whole crowd is here. Let's do. I've been saying Nivity first. Let's do Nivity first, and then we'll do our poems.
That's what I was trying to express.
Okay. Hey, Nivy, because Nivy's got to go to work. Go back to work
she's
soon.
really been waiting.
Yeah. Hey, Nivy, how you doing?
Hey, Tim. Thank you, Auntie. Good, thank you.
Yeah. Yes. So glad you could be here to share poems. So, what did you do for this week? And I didn't. What was the prompt again? The prompt was write a poem about a time that you carried more than you ever thought possible, and include a reference to temperature. Mm-hmm. Okay. So where'd you go with that, Nivy?
I went not the physical burden, but more the emotional burden that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And the temperature wasn't really a number, but more to do with the cold and the frost, as can be seen from the title of my poem. Oh. And I decided to do a hybrid, not something I do very often.
Oh, neat.
Oh, neat. Yeah. Okay. Well, go ahead.
Permafrost. I told myself it was fine. I could handle it. The silence, the distance, the slow unraveling of what once felt certain. But the cold seeped in, settling into my chest, making every breath shallow. I smiled when I had to, laughed when expected, but inside I carried a winter no one could see. The frost thickened with every unnecessary word, every unwanted slur, every unwilling minute. First snowfall. My heart learns to carry ice.
Oh, that was beautiful. I love the connection between the haiku and the text and the title too.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, really beautifully done, Nivy.
Hope you continue to write Hyben more often. That's really nice.
Yeah. As you know, we do love Hyben around these parts.
I'm going to try it more often.
Great.
Oh, great.
It just fits well with so many things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely does. Once you get the bug, though, you're never going back.
Mm-hmm.
adding Hyben to your, or haiku to your sonnets and stuff.
Yeah, I know. Crazy stuff happens.
All right. Yeah. Well, beautiful poem. Thanks for sharing that, Nivy.
Thank you. And thank you guys for letting me go first, everybody.
Of course.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks. And thanks, everybody, for reminding me. All right. Take care. Have a great day, Nivy.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks. Yeah, that was Nivy Karthik with a Permafrost, her poem for this week. Okay, now let's go to our poems, Katie.
Okay.
And so what did you come up with?
So actually, I wrote a villanelle. I did that because at first I felt like I had a lot of things that I'd carried and like I would channel through, but I don't think that's what actually ended up happening. Odd interjection though here. Out of nowhere, Lizzie asked me to watch the movie Bolt. Never having, and that's the title of the poem. It was so weird, and she didn't see it around or anything. It's like a movie from like 15 years ago.
Oh, that's psychic connection.
I know.
Always
it kind of freaked me out, honestly.
Everyone finds their Dory and Lux. Okay.
Bolt. At times, I've carried more than I ever thought I could. My daughter weighed 11 pounds plus a whole ounce. Secrets are a kind of bulb. Flowers are misunderstood. As a child, I moved every piece of furniture. Even heavy wood would fly from the floor, and words I couldn't pronounce at times carried more weight than I ever thought I could. A pen is the lightest thing I've ever held, to be understood by a page that started out blank. Ink spills, but by all accounts, secrets are a bulb that blooms even when misunderstood. A certain warmth coos the daffodils from their hoods to drop their only blanket. It's always a choice to sprout. So many times I have carried more than I should, squeezed a nest of squirming snakes. Some are just no good. But I write from the front porch swing of the new house, the secrets dissolved like light bulbs switched off. I withstood the wind and found roots, pulled my anchor up. A poetry book is just another ship outrunning another storm. Thunder shouts, "Look, I have carried you more than I ever thought I could, and secrets are a kind of lightning. Now let the flowers out.
Yeah, so I love all the refrains in that poem, Katie Dozier.
Thank you very much. The villanelle felt like a lot to chew on once I got halfway in there.
Yeah, the flowers misunderstood, and then the lightning line too, that and secrets are a kind of lightning.
Thank you. And then I worked in how I'm really good at moving furniture.
You did, which is true.
I am really good at it.
Yeah, I was gone because my son had a science fair thing, so I was doing that, and I came back to Texas, and Katie had rearranged like 4 of the rooms in the house with these huge dressers. I was like, how did you, like, I thought you were having
like
an affair
8
maybe.
foot tall dressers. I said it would have been easier.
Who is coming over helping you move these big dressers? But apparently that's just how it works. She's got some techniques. It's like the pyramids, you know? It's like, how do they move those stones? So anyway.
It reflects slightly more favorably on me than the millions. All right.
So that was Katie Dozier, and that was a nice villanelle.
Thank you.
And the funny thing is, with my poem, I wrote the first line, I started going, and it kind of felt like it wanted to be a villanelle.
Oh.
But I couldn't do a villanelle because you posted it on your Facebook, and I saw, and I can't do a villanelle too. So I made mine a sonnet.
You could have, just everyone would have known.
They would have
known
first. Yeah, it's true. That's provenance. I was there first with the villanelle. Okay, so this is my sonnet. It's called "You Had Colic for 6 months." So step by bouncing step, I'd walk you through the endless night. That was how you slept, swaddled snug in a square cloth, its blue cotton like a tiny cape. Sometimes I wept while folding it. I'd hold your left arm down and tuck one side behind your back, then tuck the other, gather up the ends around your feet and stuff them in the front, awestruck at how you'd calm the moment that I picked you up. We'd pace behind the pleather couch, investigate the hall. Your needs weren't strict. I could shift a shoulder. I was free to slouch or even listen to a book on tape as long as being held would hold its shape.
Aww.
So that's my daughter. And really, it was like...
That's really sweet.
Yeah. And she's 14 now, but man, those first 6 months, she could not sleep unless you were walking with her. And I still have plantar fasciitis to this day. Which I blame on her frequently because it's true. Just like that little walk, for 4 hours at a time or whatever is.
But now she's the opposite of this in terms of how wonderful and easy she is. So
she got it all out of the way.
All out of the way in those 6 months. Yeah, I guess.
All right. Well, that's my sonnet for this week. Let's see what everybody else has, and let's go first to Matt Joseph.
Hi guys.
Hey
Matt. Great to see you.
Sounds like my audio is working, not being nibbled
on
by
we got
gremlins.
you right away this time. Yeah,
good.
Great. Thanks so much. Yeah, I just want to start by saying it's evident. Everyone's been saying it. This forum is it's such a gift. I feel like I've stumbled upon just a treasure trove, and just being able to read these to these amazing writers and hear what their writing is so inspiring. So that's
and we're so glad you're here too. You brought so many great poems already and jumped right into the community.
Definitely.
That's great. Thanks, you guys. All right, so I'll jump right in. How a Pearl is Made. My mother's second divorce came the winter of my 10th grade year. Wet snow piling high as dirty dishes in the unkept promise of our silent kitchen. Thick as my denial that the woman she'd moved in with was anything more than her super-duper good friend. An irate wind shoved the mercury down to -15 for my early morning runs that week, breath turning to ice as it left my body, all my questions freezing midair before falling unanswered to the ground. So I stitched threads of sarcasm and silence in equal measure into the rough cloak I wore each day while serving out the remainder of my high school sentence, hoping like hell to keep the sweat-stained chagrin buried deep inside my pleats and folds, desperately wanting any cards but the offsuit 7-deuce I was dead sure I'd been dealt. Looking back now across the valley of 40 years, it's a shame, my shame, that I carried the truth of that fierce woman from whom I sprang, secreted away like a small black sun, a wee gorgonette, enough to blind or turn to stone any soul I dared to part my robes for. If only that flat-footed, nearsighted, long-ago me could have seen the wide green all of it, yet to come. For here we are now, my wife, myself, my mother, her wife, living all together, the 4 of us beneath one roof, having done the mostly Lord's, sometimes devil's work of raising two children up into who they are becoming, our aging arms linked in the shape of a kept promise to these two free-ranging creatures of laughter and doubt and light, a promise we made that they will carry with them in their heart's deep velvet pockets the off-key tune of our snaggle-toothed chorus to hum along with all their days, rattling beside the bright, hard pearl of our imperfect and unyielding love.
Oh, another really sweet poem, Matt. Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks. You too. That was Matt Joseph with How a Pearl is Made. Next, let's go to Chelsea McGlynn.
Sorry, that took me a second because
No problem, Chelsea.
I couldn't tell if he said Chelsea McClellan or Chelsea McGlynn either. So
Oh,
I couldn't tell. So I was just like, this will make itself known. So if that's what you were wondering, that's me too.
yeah. I don't even know what you said. I think I
Yes.
might have said both at the same
I
time.
know. I think that's what happened.
All right. Well, anyway,
It's
Chelsea
clear now.
McClellan.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why I said McClellan.
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Chelsea McClellan.
Yes.
So, how you doing today, Chelsea?
I'm doing good. It's good to see you all. So my poem, I didn't realize until the end, but I think for me it's a spiritual poem, or it could also be read as a marriage poem. Or I suppose you could just read it for what it is. So it's the Ode to the Seed Box. Ode to the Seed Box. Because of you, I stumbled up the stairs, regretted that I hadn't dumped you out last year, found smaller ones to hold instead, with flowers in one, and beans would need their own. But here we are, my bruised arm and hip, and you, your bang-proof, rain-proof shell intact, just staring at each other on the stairs. Revisiting the reasons cardboard lost its argument with you last year. And yes, I know, you close up in a hurry, lock, and drape your strap around my anxious back. And yes, I know your past, the photographs you've taken on the cameras that you held so gently in your cushioned belly. Yes, I'm sorry that I ripped out half your foam. I know how much you carry on my behalf. A freezer full of spinach, peppers, corn. Shall I go on? Full larder shelves for years, full bellies in my kids, and extra seeds to let them plant a garden of their own. The motivation to face the cold March sun, the right to rest, the sweet of sweat, and yes, you hold my hope of germination. I know the promises we made last year, and no, I have no plans to change my mind. Do you? You swore to carry all I can't, if I'll just carry you and you alone.
Yeah, beautiful poem. And again, your poems are always so sonically wonderful. That's
Yeah.
another example of that, Chelsea. Thanks so much
Yeah,
for sharing
definitely.
that.
Does she have a picture at the end of that?
Oh, did I miss it?
Yeah.
There is.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. I was
Thank
so
you.
wondering, is this actually so this is the real deal. This is the seed box. Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, I have such green thumb envy.
This is-
I'm so I'm awful.
Yeah. I wish.
I have a potted rosemary plant in the back.
And we forgot about it. I needed rosemary
I know.
tonight
I
to
came
make
back
the
from my bike
lasagna.
ride. Tim's like, we need to get rosemary. I'm like, we have a rosemary plant.
Oops. Oh well.
Oops. It's okay.
It's fine with time. Anyway,
Okay.
thanks. Thanks so much, Chelsea. that
Thank
was great as
you.
always. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye. It was Chelsea McClellan with a Ode to the Seed Box. And next, let's go to Rod Deasy.
Hello, good evening.
Hi,
Hey, Rod.
Rod.
Great to see you.
How are you?
Great. Yeah.
Okay, good. This is a piece of whimsy called Spring Migration. Bob Dylan said, "You can never go back," but I was going back to my home in Maryland. after a year in London to see if I wanted to go back to England for good. I didn't. I gave notice at work and my wife flew back early to vacuum up a year's worth of spiders. I went to England with one suitcase. I left with two, plus a carry-on, 2 guitars, a mandola and a mandolin. What was I thinking? I strapped instruments about my person, thanked the music gods that I had sold my heavy banjo, picked up my suitcases and headed for Heathrow. It was a cold spring day, raining, of course. I slept across the ocean and took a shuttle from BWI to the station in Frederick, but could barely carry everything to our house on Church Street. I kept having to stop and rest. Then I realised I was toting a slab of sky from England's fens, flat and dense, big like Montana's, above a plainate landscape. And on my back were reaches from perfect fen rivers, the Lark, the Wissey, the Little Ouse, the Cam, all full of wild water lilies, edged with gnarly willows and yellow flag irises, rose bay willow herbs, kingcups, and water forget-me-nots. Wildflower dreams of younger days. Also, I found I was carrying birds. So many birds. Swallows, swifts, wagtails, warblers, moorhens, and more. They were perching on my luggage, hiding in my pockets, creeping inside my instrument cases, nesting in my guitars, and it was standing room only on my hat and shoulders. There was even a Canada goose in my carry-on. My favourite kingfishers darted away down Carroll Creek, while a great blue heron glided in front of me, landed, and then took off as if gently stepping up into the air. He looked hopefully at the koi pond in our neighbour's yard. Surprisingly, I didn't bring much actually from London. Just a musty, misty oil painting of Waterloo Bridge, which I found at a jumble sale, artist not yet known, plus some words by Wordsworth on my phone, a sonnet. "Hi, honey," I called. "I'm home." I flew over with a bunch of birds. I brought a ton of stuff.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love the Canadian goose in my carry-on.
Yeah, I have to
Such
say
a great
too,
line.
I love the line. Can you scroll down just a sec? Because I want to.
Yeah.
A wildflower dreams of younger days. I think that's a monoku. I think it works as though the wildflower is actually the one dreaming, and then the wildflower dreams of younger. I think it's really a great line.
Yeah, beautiful
Yeah.
poem, Rod. Yeah, so
Yeah.
many great details and. Oops.
Sorry.
Hey, Katie just dropped her phone.
Whoa.
Is what we're wondering. But anyway, yeah, so many details. Thanks so much for sharing that, Rod. Really
Thanks.
wonderful, and always great hearing you read your poems too.
Yeah, thanks.
That was
Thank
Rod
you.
Deasy with Spring Migration. And next, let's go to Nate Jacob.
Caught me. Hey.
Hey, Nate. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good.
Right on.
I have to say first, Nate, that you had really brilliant comments on this episode of the Poetry Space this week. And I have to say, you also had the most creative way of sharing the link on your Facebook, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, but saying you were voted the least likely to be on a podcast squad.
Correct. All the way back in 1990.
And I read it, and then I had to read it out loud to Tim because I was,
It was
laughing
funny.
about it. Good. Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah,
poet, so
it
I'm
was a great
truth teller.
episode, the Poetry Space.
Yeah.
And your
It was
contribution.
a fun conversation.
Wonderful.
And
Yeah.
analysis, and I see you're wearing cardinal red also.
Actually, it's Kansas City red.
Oh,
and
sorry.
Kansas City blue. See that?
Oh, okay. Well, I was trying to make a Billy Collins poem reference from the episode, but I guess everybody else missed that.
Over my
So
Stay
over
tuned,
everyone's head, it
friends.
flew.
Stay tuned. That's a good one. All right. Well, I got a poem
Good.
called, thank you. Thank you very much. It's called I Cloud Concerns. It wasn't my intention when I left on my walk to puddle like some abandoned old barn along the unkempt fence line that runs too close for comfort between the highway and the spring runoff swollen river below. How to carry these loads, how to carry on. I had no real plans in mind at all, frankly. Had never thought once about the size, the enormity of the boulders midstream that surely fell from above a few miles upstream and were pushed into place by the icy flow created by warming days and their gentle melts. I hadn't wanted to think about anything at all, had only wanted to walk away from the dog with his perfectly adorable twitching eyebrows, away from the children avoiding board games, away from the clean house and the mowed yard, away only briefly from my wife and her perfect love. And then I looked up into the billowing clouds, soft as anything I could imagine at ground level, softer than my youngest child's cheeks, softer than the secret things my wife whispers late. But then it occurred to me, to my wandering mind, to calculate the weight of the rain, each drop adding to drops, covering the walks and streets, collecting in low spots, then running in gutters by the gallons, by the gallons, by the gallons. And though it hadn't rained yet, I ran back to my wife, my kids, my dog, and the weight of a beautiful life. Let the storm come if it will.
What a beautiful poem. I love that
Wow.
ending. Yeah.
Aw, your family must love that poem too. I mean, how wonderful to have you write that. And then I'm sure you've shared it with your wife in the very least, right?
Not yet. I never let them read them until after. They can listen to
Wow.
it once we're
That's
finished,
good.
so.
Oh, wow.
So we get priority. Ha.
Yeah, nice.
Well, I'm
Okay.
sure
Right.
they're all going to love it because it's
They
really
definitely
sweet.
will.
Mhm.
Mhm.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Nate.
Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, that was Nate Jacob with iCloud Concerns.
Very cool use of cloud.
It
Thank
is.
you
I love the
for that.
puddling too.
I really just want to
With
say
the-
that, like, the next time you say something I'm suspicious of, I'll be like, iCloud concerns.
All right, well, I'll report back if she ever actually does that.
I will. Trust me.
Okay.
It's happening.
Let's go to another squad member, Brian O'Sullivan,
Oh,
next.
great.
Hello.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Brian, great to see you.
Hi. Yeah, it's great to see you. So, I have something. It's I tried again the form of a sort of upside down Shakespearean sonnet that I was
Right.
trying a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure if it makes much sense.
that's
this
such an
time,
That's
interesting
so cool.
form.
I really
It
want
is.
to try it. Uh-oh, could be a
Yeah.
future prompt.
Uh-oh. Okay.
It's called The Dream of Atlas and Hercules. Daddy and I were standing in front of his hotel, the Carlisle, which had jumped from New York to the banks of the Nile. He wore the uniform he'd worn for 40 years, with shoulders slightly rounded from the weight of bags. My mom nearby was in the middle of a crying jag. Dad's eyes twinkled and almost calmed my fears. He placed the luggage in my hands, and I could feel the weight of all the world in them, from the oceans and the mountains and their buried gems to a small house in Queens where kids forever cry. In one moment, I stood for decades outside the Carlisle through sweating summers and lip-cracking winters, and went home to calm nightmares and pull splinters. More than I could carry, but he handled it with style.
Yeah, I really love the form.
Yeah,
I don't
me
know.
too.
I think I asked last time, Brian, but I don't remember the answer. Is this a form other people do? I've never seen it upside down like that.
I haven't found it. I mean, I think people have done like upside down Petrarchan sonnets, which I'm not really sure how that. I don't know how to do that, but yeah, no. I had a poem last time that I kind of wanted to start with a couplet, and I also thought it made sense last time because I kind of wanted to move from certainty to doubt. Not really sure if I did that this time, but I just wanted to play with the form, you know.
Brian, you're so modest. If I were you and I was the one doing this, I think that we should just call this Theo Sullivan. Can we all just agree? This is
Theo
Theo
Sullivan
Sullivan.
sonnet.
Yeah,
Well,
that's as far as I know. It's
Theo
even
O'Sullivan
been
sonnet.
Yeah. Sullivan sonnet. Yep.
All right. But there's a really neat effect of having
Yeah,
that couplet
it is
first,
really
and then the
interesting.
poem sort of unfolding out of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's really neat.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, cool
Thanks,
stuff. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Yep, Brian O'Sullivan with The Dream of Atlas and Hercules. Let's go to a first-time caller, Dennis Usden. Oops, I muted you by accident as you were unmuting. Sorry, unmute yourself again.
Please. Yay.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Dennis. Yeah, great to see you. Thanks for joining.
All right.
Where are you calling from?
Boca Raton, Florida.
Oh, Boca Raton.
nice.
Okay. I know that my mom's
Right.
in West Palm Beach or just outside in Port
All
St.
right.
Lucie. Yeah.
Well, he's near somebody we know. Okay. Ready? For the name of this poem is called The School Bus.
All right, I've got it up. Yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready.
The lit cigarette burning the back of my neck. I was riding in a dirty yellow school bus. Feeling an intense, searing pain, I turned around, glimpsing a cigarette in the bully's fingers. Jumping over the back of my seat, surprising him, my body falling on his, twisting sharply to the aisle, holding him down in his ashes, a long blue sleeve pulling me off, pushing me in their patrol car, taking me home. Mother answers the door, listening to the description of the event. After closing the door, my mom says, "Congratulations. Now clean your room." We hug.
Oh, that was great, Dennis. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was a classic Rattle style poem, which we're always looking for more of. Yeah,
Glad to hear that.
those
Really,
clean narrative.
as a first timer,
story.
I was kind of
well,
nervous.
Thanks so much for sharing that.
But thank you guys, and congratulations on your wedding as well.
Oh, thanks so much, Dennis. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Dennis Usden, first time caller with a school bus. Katie had to step out. The girls, one girl's watching the other, and that only lasts for so long when they're 8 and 5. So Katie had to step out. She might come back later, but we'll see if she's able to. But let's keep the prompt lines rolling, and let's go to Hamid Malik next.
Hi.
Hey, Hamid, great to see you.
You too. Mine's very short this week.
All right. Let's see. Let me pull it up.
Ripped.
Got it.
Okay, I'll wait. Yep. Ripped. Cover up to my naked. Ice to my longing. Fire to my flaws. So many drills to strengthen these walls. The abs of my presence are carved and bulging. I can lift your abuse with my little finger and bounce it on the floor at your feet. Your thermite words are chalk on my palms now. A kiss to snow your heat.
Oh, very nice. I love the rhyme at the end, pulling that through, and then your thermite words are chalk on my palms now. I love that too. Yeah, very vivid. Thanks so much for sharing that, Hamid.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Hamid Malik with Ripped. Let's go to Stephen Croft next.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Stephen. Great to see you.
Thank you. So my weight is psychological, like some others. And it's about climate change.
Mm-hmm.
If this poem resonates with anyone, I would recommend a book by Roy Scranton called Learning to Die in the Anthropocene. My poem's a visceral response to climate change. His book is more of an intellectual consideration. We need to build arcs like the Seed Vault in Norway or the digital mapping of museums that will probably disappear this century because we're doomed in his estimation. And I think that we probably are. And so we need to start girding ourselves. So this is Anthropocene Anxiety.
All right, you got it.
As the beehive of news stories grew, scientists reporting back from Greenland's shrinking ice sheet, coral reefs in Australia, the Florida Keys, the feedback loops of forests lost and wildfire, a beehive building like the global sauna our drowsy governments offer an impossible treaty to slake. Suddenly a question rose before me. Why are we losing our grip on our world's biggest problem? Because it is too far gone to hold? Because floodwater and crabgrass want our cities? Miners complain about the Earth's heat as they dig lower for coal to send to the surface. Metaphor become metamorphosis. Today, I can't look at a dome of beautiful March sky without my mind's eye seeing a blue lit jail for a fevered planet, without my mind's ear hearing buffalo herds of wind speaking in tongues of shrieks across this doomed green land.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that, Stephen. That's something I worry about a lot, is the anxiety caused by all the climate change things. So thanks so much for sharing that. Really interesting poem.
And yeah, one of the things that Roy Scranton talks about is the anxiety he had when his daughter was born and what the future generations will probably have to deal with. So we all, I guess, have to think about that.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Stephen.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good night. Yeah, that was Stephen Croft with Anthropocene Anxiety. Next, let's go to Amanda Harris.
So literally, as you were like deciding, I was thinking to myself, "Oh God, let it be me, let it be me." I'm always like that. All right.
Great. Well, we can tell you're jumping at the bit. Well, it's always great,
All right.
Amanda. What do you got for us this week?
So I have a poem called Goodness. Goodness is a weight anchored into nothing. Its heat scratches the back and leaves the back a continent trespassed. Like a rodent, I stand on my arched legs. Like a saint, I give, give, give.
Well, a beautiful poem as always. I love how they rush through and always go somewhere, even 6 lines as that is. It's a really cool poem. Thanks for sharing that,
Thank
Amanda.
you.
Yeah, that was Amanda Harris with Goodness. Cruising through, we get to everybody. Let's go to Mike Bales next.
I'd have to thank you for sticking with us. This is going to be a long night for you.
Yeah, it's all right.
So-
I had a little bit of a late lunch, and I got a good lasagna cooking. So I'm looking forward
that
to
sounds
that.
good.
Yeah.
I found vegetable lasagna in the grocery store. I can kind of have it meatless.
Uh-huh.
I revised this a little bit since I sent it to you. At my age, I'm proud to have survived the roughest times of my life. And this poem's called Moving Day. Some boxes were packed, some not on the day I gave up the apartment. A friend helped me load up the van. I couldn't do it myself. It was warm for a day in February as we filled the van, and the weight of regret, the job I lost, was more than I could bear. She cried one day that everyone was asking for more, and she was out of work herself. Forecast was for fair weather, but so much had changed. Cloudless skies hovered over me as she and I carried my belongings to her house a 40-minute drive away. And after we unloaded, I went back for more, surprised how much could be accumulated in the span of my life. Her town was founded as a settlement of like-minded settlers who wanted tolerance for the religion they practice. Each time I unloaded the van, I bore the weight of a depression, and crossing the threshold, I was looking for a chance.
Oh yeah, wonderful expression of that feeling you get when it's moving day. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks. So Mike Bales with Moving Day. Next, let's go to Tina Denniclaw.
Hey, so
Hey,
I have
Tina.
to. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. Yeah.
I wish that I had lasagna cooking at my house too.
And it's even better. I make 2, so we have one to eat and one to freeze, which is the best part about
Oh.
lasagna night. Yeah.
That's such a smart thing to do. Yeah, it's going to be in and out, I think, for us. Okay, so mine is long. Your mother isn't here. The beautician was combing out the teasing in a lady's hair. I sat down to wait. You can't be here. Will you call her? I'm not calling your mother. You need to leave. Mom had brought me to visit the retired farmer's wife who lived in the house behind us before we moved to the edge of town. I sat on the green loops of her sculptured carpet, she and I watching Lawrence Welk, while her husband read the newspaper. I was to play a little while, then find Mom in the beauty shop. By the time I walked the grassy space between houses and past the rusty drum incinerator filled with empty hairspray cans, I was already late. Rebuffed at the salon, I returned to my friend's brown brick house where her husband met me at his closed, screened door. Go where your mother told you. He would not let me in. She isn't there. Do what your mother told you. Will you call her for me? No. I sat on the curb in front of his house that warm summer day. I was completely alone. He yelled at me from his porch, "Get out of the street." Too young to know my way home, I started out. By the time I reached the gas station 2 blocks up, I was running. A burly man with red hair, pumping gas, was puzzled to see me. I stopped in front of him, let out a cry, and ran faster. At the end of every block, I had to decide which way to go. Then I ran again. I ran past our friend's house. Glenda was in her yard, waving to me from the other side of the street. "Your mom is looking for you." I ran faster, crying. When I found the elementary school, I wasn't lost anymore. 1 block again, and I walked through my own screen door into our kitchen. Mom was at the sink, peeling carrots for dinner. Where were you? I didn't know how to answer. At 4 years old, I had taken myself home.
Wow, what a memory at 4 years old. Thanks so much for sharing that, Tina.
You're welcome. I relate to Bree. I'm remembering toddlerhood.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so, all right, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, really vivid memory again. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Tina Dennett-Claw with Your Mother Isn't Here.
Yeah, and my husband in the background.
That's great.
Talking to the cats. Thank you.
Okay, bye, Tina. Yeah, Tina Dennett-Claw once again. Next, let's go to Dick Westheimer.
Well, hello.
Hey, Dick. Great to see you.
I just loved that interview tonight. I mean, I know I say that a lot, but this is one I think I'm going to go back and listen to.
Yeah. I mean, she was very, very smart and open and discussed a lot. It was great.
And yeah, great poems. And as always, one of the great things about the listening to Rattlecast is listening to you discover new things about poetry. Sort of like, you kind of work out on your own poetic issues when you're talking to other folks, and I love hearing that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why it's always stays fun. It hasn't gotten bored yet in 184 episodes.
Yeah,
so
that's well, it's a bottomless well, isn't it?
Yeah,
Trying
it
to
really
figure out
feels like that. I always wonder if eventually maybe it'll run dry, but it doesn't. It's always fun.
Okay, well, let me jump into my poem because it is another long one. And last week I had a very short one, but let's go with this. And as usual, Katie's prompt sort of made me uncover something I hadn't remembered for a while. Carrying Kevin to the grave. I told Kevin that we're all moving at the speed of light in space-time. He replied that I was likely right, but that wouldn't help me haul the Gravely sickle bar attachment out into the tractor yard. I asked him for help. What would help, he said, was if I just decided I could do it. You're as strong as I am. You just think too much. And he's right. It was like all of time dilated into that 1 year he lived here. We built a barn, dug the foundation for our house in 100-degree heat, quit smoking dope, started again, listened to a shit ton of Grateful Dead, and I learned to play the guitar. And he just up and left, headed out west to work sales for his brother's natural hairbrush business. I didn't hear from him till the late night calls began. He'd ring at 3 a.m. Deb and I slept on a pull-out couch, and that first call woke the baby, and Kevin harangued about me owing him big money for all the work he did. And that his brother's business wasn't worth a damn. And later I heard from his sister that he started using smack, and they found his body in a ditch halfway up Cone Peak off Route 22S, and he'd be 70 now, helping me out and teaching me how to carry things too heavy to hold.
Oh, really, really powerful storytelling in that one, Dick. Thanks so much for sharing that. Carrying Kevin to the grave. Yeah, really, I really like that poem a lot. Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, it was Dick Westheimer with Carrying Kevin to the Grave. All right, next let's go to Christiana Doucette.
Hello.
Hey, Christiana, great to see you.
Good to see you too. So I feel like I'm following the theme that you had, and Katie even had a little bit of this theme in her poem tonight too. And that's, my daughter did not sleep well.
Yeah.
I don't think that she didn't sleep through the night until she was over a year old. And every time there was a Wonder Week, it was really hard. So, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months. At 9 months, it was like every 30 minutes to 45 minutes all night long for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
She was up. And it's the only time in my life that I have wanted to die, but I wouldn't have helped myself along to that, but the idea of eternal rest sounded.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I mean, that was 6 months for me, but I don't remember the 6 months. Like, I look back at the issues of Rattle that I did, then, and I'm like, how did that even happen? Because I don't remember anything. It was really, because I'd come home from work and just, walk, and she couldn't sleep unless we were carrying her, or, we tried everything, of course, too, and just over and over, and then just one day over and it was fine, and we never figured out what, and all the elimination diets and the peppermint oils and the medication and the nothing.
Right, because you're going to try everything you can because sleep is
really
so needed.
Yeah. All right, well, let's hear this, Christiana.
So my poem's called I Dance My Daughter to Sleep Again. There in the warm, dark, pilled carpet beneath bare feet, I bounce and sway as exhaustion plays with my mind, telling me I will never find rest again. Her hair is sweet, and the slow beat of lullaby is something like heaven, but this is waking number 7, and the clock just past midnight talks like tonight will never end. She's quiet. So I bend to set her back down and cover her nightgown with the muslin blanket. Perhaps there's a dozen more wakings, a dozen more dancings, a dozen more settings to rest before blessed dawn breaks alongside me and she sleeps. In my chest, there's a heap of tired, sprawling like a tantrum. There's a phantom flutter at my temples, spinning me round. The world is tilting. I am wilting against the door frame, silently begging for quiet, but here she is again, defiant voice, shrieking fears I cannot leave her to face alone. The tired is in my bones, heavy like a stone I can't lift. There's a rift ripping between time and reality. I feel my mortality. I feel the fiery tide rising, baptizing me in a despair my prayers don't quench. But she is in my arms. I swallow the clench in my throat and hum that lullaby note by note, sanity afloat on the tipsy raft some musician crafted about sugar seas. I just want sleep. We both can seize.
That was beautiful. So captured the anxiety and like the panic, that feeling of panic when you're just like, I need sleep so bad.
Please sleep.
Yeah. Oh man, that brings me down.
I think I found that I can do like 3 nights in a row of low sleep, and then after that, like it's like reality is not reality anymore, and everything just it's too much.
Yeah, for sure. And great music in that, as always. Love the internal rhymes everywhere. Thanks for sharing that, Christiana. There's Christiana Doucette with I Dance My Daughter to Sleep Again. Next, let's go to Carla Schwartz.
Hi.
Hey, Carla. Great to see you.
Great to see everybody. Such a great night. I wrote a Hyben along the lines of, not necessarily physical weight. and not necessarily temperature in degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And here we go.
Okay.
Calling. I was attending a class, a 3-day workshop. The night before the last day, when the phone rang in the almost midnight, it had to be my sister telling me my mother gone. So much weight on me, her death not unexpected, but final. It was a cold night in November when the call came. Had my blood gone cold, like everyone said, when I showed up the next morning to class? I couldn't concentrate. All I could do was email to tell people my news, how sad I was, to lay bare the weight of my sadness. But education was macrameed into my family, and I showed up to this, the last course in my user-centered design certificate. What did it mean in the end? Another piece of paper, another line on the resume. I can't say it meant much now, means much now, but I let my mother, who only slowed her learning her last months alive, guide me. I handed in my project on time, but now I, still burdened with grief, wonder how usable is a life missing a mother's love. 5 degrees, never stop to measure the weight of grief.
Oh, I love the haiku especially, Carla. That was great. And the way that story unfolds, too, was really touching. Yeah,
Well,
thanks
thank
for sharing.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was Carla Schwartz with Calling. Let's go to a first-time caller next, I think. Michelle Mayer? Hey,
Hi,
Michelle.
I'm here. I've
Yeah.
been on once before,
Okay,
actually.
yeah, it looked familiar, but I wasn't quite sure. It's sometimes hard to
Yeah.
remember who is like, in the chat windows a lot and who's actually been on. But it's great to see you. Thanks for being here. Where are you calling from again?
Well, last time I was calling from Durango because I was on a house sit,
Oh,
and
that's right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
tonight I'm calling from Wisconsin. We actually just got back today, so I'm a little road weary, and I have to apologize because I just noticed I made one spelling error on the poem, which I will correct in the reading.
Well, that's all right. No problem
Please
at all. That
excuse my
definitely
weariness.
happens.
It has
Mhm.
nothing to do with having a child, but I've been on the road for 3 days, so
Well, no worries about that at all. Yeah. So let's
and
hear the poem. Mm-hmm.
sure, it goes a little bit with Carla's theme, I would say.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Voyager. Star Trek never turned me on until I found myself in a desert, flat on my stomach, face pressed into the ground, naked. Confused, I tried to get up, fell to my knees, a backpack weighing me down. In it, no food, no water, just love and death and the memory of both. From what I know, Spock was stoic, but sometimes he shed a tear. I wonder if he ever took one back to the starship, or if they all froze and shattered during teleportation. All that wet energy snowflaking onto a parched lawn during the heaviness of summer. The desert is so hot, then so cold, then so hot again. Either way, I shiver. Grief is a transporter. It pulls. It dematerializes, beams me back to the day we sat in the shade and drank margaritas, to the day we sat in the ICU and you died, to the waiting room full of sad strangers, all of us naked, carrying backpacks through the desert, hot sun on our faces, hot blood on our knees, still waiting to rematerialize.
Great use of that extended metaphor through the Star Trek. And I am a Star Trek fan. I love Star Trek. So it's really neat to see. You don't see many Star Trek poems, actually. I can only remember very, very few. That's really neat. Thanks for sharing that. Michelle.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks. That was Voyager by Michelle Mayer. Let's see. Let's go next to Jared Campbell. Are you still there, Jared?
Yep.
Hey,
Hello.
great. Good to see you. Yeah, thanks for waiting.
No problem. Yep. So I did a prose poem, but it's got the proportions of a Petrarchan sonnet, roughly.
Interesting. Okay.
Dim suffusion birthday crab. The leaden sky was pressing down on me. Like a duck in a duck press, the dripping from the eaves directed my attention to the stubborn patches of snow remaining in the yard like an archipelago slowly disappearing beneath a rising sea. The dim suffusion through the clouds revealed the unfamiliarity of the subdivision. This is not the neighborhood where I grew up. This is not the grass my father cut. This flatness is not the flatness that held me as a child. The oak in the yard had held the sky up for another improbable year. It seemed incapable, especially now, as it stood naked, each bony finger visible against the lead pressing down. That tree couldn't hope to hold that sky for another year, but it seemed to plan to. I turned away and went in to my wife. The water in the pot grew hotter and hotter and hotter until it could no longer hold its heat, and it changed its phase and as a trapped vapor threw itself against the walls and lid. The crabs reddened. We sat and repeatedly performed the ritual, breaking off a leg, placing it in the space up by the hinge between the two steel legs of the cracker, and pressing, 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 until all at once the shell broke open and we removed the white flesh and ate it between sips of California champagne. After everything was empty, we drunkenly gathered the shells and threw them in the trash. My son witnessed everything.
That is great. So I love the strangeness of the way that's presented. It's a really fun poem. Thanks for sharing that, Jared.
Thank you.
Yeah, dim suffusion birthday crab. Yeah, really neat. Really just strong writing throughout. Yeah, so vivid. Let's go next to Janet. I think Janet McConaughey. I think you're not there. Oh, I clicked on something wrong. I think your sound's not connected, so maybe we can come back to you in a bit. What did I do? Okay. I'm like pinning people by accident. Sorry. Okay, let's go to Danica Dinsmore next. That was rough. Hey, Danica, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Last week it was all happiness, and now it's like this week's pretty heavy.
It is. It's a heavy week. It's a heavy topic. No pun intended.
Yeah. This is Haibun-ish. I've never been very talented at haiku, so I write Haibun-ish stuff. I do want to tell you, I've been working on a memoir of me taking care of my mom through her passing, and it wasn't really quite gelling. And I'd never really written Haibun before, and now I can't stop. And what happened is the memoir is coming out in Haibun.
Oh, wow. Well, that's
Because of
really
you
cool.
guys.
Yeah, oh, that's really neat. Well,
It's
it's to
all
make sure.
Katie's fault, really.
Yeah, she's probably
So
listening
yeah.
in the other room.
It's all your fault,
Cheering a
Katie.
little bit.
No, it was like, oh my gosh, this has to be like, it just made sense that it was written that way, each little episode that I have. So yeah, thank you for
that's really
your
cool.
amazing
Yeah,
influence.
great to
Yeah.
hear.
So this crazy, I had this dream. This poem starts off with this dream that I had last Sunday night after we were told to write about something that we didn't think we could carry anymore. Last winter. Last night you were with me in a dream. Your mom, my grandmother too. At the edge of a beach, promenading in spite the chill, of a gathering storm. Ahead on the boardwalk, young couple and two girls in white dresses. The horizon suddenly looming, a tidal wave, big as a mountain and moving fast, scraping seaplanes from the sky. Seconds away. The young mother and I catch eyes in realization. There is no time for anything other than our love. I wrap my arms around my mother's, pull them close, whisper, "This is it. I will love you forever." The wave veers and dissipates. I sigh relief until another tidal wave rises up in the storm. I was in high school when you were diagnosed with lupus. We kids an age when hearts flounder to incorporate any more than what is brewing inside us. You spent all your days, for months, lying moon-faced on the couch. No internet for me to investigate your disease. Just having received my driver's license, I drove into teenage trouble, and you seemed so confidently at peace. Tired, but never vile, never angry, never pitiful, nor in grief. Over time, remission, then relief. It wasn't until years later, my own body betraying me, that I asked, "How did you do it?" "Prayer," you answered, and I've always felt guilty for not being able to heal myself ever since. You spent an extraordinary amount of time in silence in our last years. No music, no radio, no TV before the evening news, only coqui frogs and bird calls as backdrop. I used to wonder where you were in there, always thought, lost. Your world shrunk while your possessions became junk piles, the accumulations of years, all sag, all disrepair and dust. I fixed your roof, cleaned up dried blood, exterminated rats and cockroaches and fleas, all the while you smiled, forever repeating, "Everybody should love everybody." This is it. All your days exterminated.
Oh wow, yeah, I love that. So thanks so much for sharing that, Danica. That's a really powerful story again, and the haiku was great at the end. It wasn't on the screen, so can you say the
Yes,
haiku?
it was. It's hidden. It was one of my little Easter eggs.
Oh, okay.
Did you see that one? Because I sent. You might have the old version. Did you have the old version? Oh, you do. Sorry, you have an older version. I sent a newer
there's
one.
a newer version. Okay, I hadn't seen that. Okay.
It was a little, you know how I started the little Easter egg Haiban where the haiku is tucked inside the prose instead of between her. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the version, and now you can see they're set off now. So this is it. All your days exterminated. Yeah, that's really neat and really fun to play with. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. It's a really neat form to do it that way.
Yeah. Sorry, I sent the wrong one first, but yeah, the Easter egg haiku is like a little game.
Well, that's very fun, like an erasure too. So that's really neat. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, thanks, Danica. Yeah, because Danica Dinsmore with Last Winter. Let's go to Laura Berg next.
Hello.
Hey, Laura. Great to see you.
A lot of heavy things here.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's definitely that kind of prompt. What do you got for us?
I have the weight of history, but it's pretty raw. I think I wander around from first person to second person. It needs some work, but here we go.
Okay.
Heavy, heavy hang over thy head. As if I had a body in that suitcase, I slogged head down, breath frozen, through sleet across the tracks in Warsaw, where I'd also brought my father to catch a glimpse of our before. Father tried to catch up, his own suitcase weighing even more than mine, which was heavy, heavy, as if I'd taken every bad feeling in the world, stuffed it in, then sat on top, struggling with the zipper the way the gods must have wrestled to close Pandora's box. Doesn't it make more sense to focus on pleasant thoughts? Just unhitch the old balagan, that last wagon in the caravan, where all the sundries, bones, junk, old costumes are piled, and let it roll downhill into a field of rotting stalks. Or go ahead and do the American thing. Trade in everything you've got for a new car, instead of dragging your past around. Drive your fastest and pretend there is nothing behind you, while ahead lies paradise.
Oh, what a turn there, that American thing. Thanks so much for sharing that, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks, yeah. That was Laura Berg with Heavy, Heavy Hang Over Thy Head. And let's see. Next, let's go to Don Gasky. Don Caskey.
Yes, hello.
Hey, Don, great to see you.
I don't know if you got mine or not. I sent it at the last minute, just before the show.
Yeah.
It is, wait a minute.
Let's see. I'm checking my...
It was from Submittal. I sent it
over on Submittal. Okay, hang on. Yeah, let me pull up. So what was your thing you were lifting?
Mine was minutes. The weight of minutes. The title is Wait a Minute. I'll go ahead and read it for you, though.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll have it up in a second. Go.
It took all its strength to hold me, let alone carry me from there to here. I'm not an easy lift with my baggage. I could see its face turning red, perspiring forehead in the hot July parking lot. Ants can carry 50 times their weight, but that's small potatoes compared to the long line of minutes who have carried me from mewling wet to tottering dotage. Each was a 60-second Sherpa of my events, my meals, my oxygen, carriers of my cares and epiphanies, who show up like clockwork. Here now is 5:51 p.m., exhausted, hands me to 5:52 p.m., and we head to the car where 5:53 p.m. waits to help me unlock the door, and 5:52 p.m., eyebrows raised over wide eyes, says, "Phew, good luck with this one." Each minute's burdens vary, of course, some as light as the joy-filled minute of a jelly-filled donut, some as heavy as the minute you find your lover's goodbye note on the dresser. I try not to think that one day one of them could stumble. Try not to think about the inevitable day when one of them will not show up for work.
Yeah, well, profound poem. I love that line too. The joy-filled minute of the joy-filled minute of the jelly-filled donut. That's great. Yeah, really wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that, Don.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Don Caskey with Wait a Minute. Let's see. Let's go to Janet McConaughey next.
Okay. Would it be possible for somebody else to read it?
Yeah, no problem, Janet. It is on your... I don't know what the situation is, but your microphone is really quiet for me. And usually...
Yeah, I listened to last week's Rattlecast, and it sounded like I was talking from inside a mountain of... I've gone blank on the county fair treat.
Yeah, well, that's all right. Yeah, no problem. And I'm not sure what the situation is. It sounds like it's like a distant microphone. Like maybe it might be using a microphone that's like part of a camera that's like not right there or something. I'm not sure, but maybe we could figure it out at some point. But yeah, well, definitely. I'd be happy to read the poem for you, though. Okay. So, yeah, that's Janet McConaughey, who's been leaving really wonderful comments in the chat the whole time, too. You know, everybody here in the Zoom has been on the chat for like an hour and a half or more. So thanks for being here and their patience. Let me find Janet's poem. And it's right here. Janet said, I'm likely, late tonight, because a shanty singing group I am in is a gig that starts at 3:30 p.m. Central. That's really fun. But yeah, here's the poem. It's Remembrance. Here we go. Remembrance. To Larry, December 13, 1948 to February 2nd, 2024. You lost my name years ago. Mom doesn't like that, you told the junior cat. I thought you were twitting me. I thought you remembered that I'd said I would never call myself a pet, Mom. You were the word man, the raconteur. Even when wet air sweated 95 degrees to 105 at the park where we volunteered, you strode the boardwalk, eager to see alligators you had named and to tell gator tales, captivating curious tourists while I lingered, framing flower photographs. You needed a cane, then a walker. You lost more words, your stories stuttered. I stayed with you always. Our little car sputtered and died. Its replacement turned out to be just right for a folding wheelchair. The park, with its serrated reptiles, was your love. I had to refuse your pleas to go there. You always forgot that off your wheels, on the uneven earth, you'd fall. For me, one thing diluted despair. Your answers when doctors asked, "Who is that with you?" You once said, she's my everything. Another time, gazing into my eyes like we had forever, will you marry me? A very sweet poem. Yeah, thanks so Trishana, Janet. We have a photograph too of Tom. So sorry for your loss, and a beautiful poem that was. Thanks for sharing that, Janet, and some photos here of Thomas Toohey. Thanks so much, Janet. And once again, that was Janet McConaughey with Remembrance. All right, is that everybody on the Zoom? Let's see. Yeah, we've got to everybody. So thanks again, everybody, for all your patience in waiting out that long break. Really nice to have a full set of poems already. Let's see what Ted Guevara had for us. And he's got an interesting picture. Speaking of the weight and the baby theme that has come up. For those just listening on the radio, this right here is a photo of a man holding a baby who's being fed, the father presumably. And he has a tape to his face, a picture of the mother, so the baby will stay calm and happy while he's looking at his phone. So a funny photo from Ted. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. Let's see what his poem was. Gender don't care. To lull the innocent who have yet to develop depth is easy. I could reach for her, but why? She's here holding me with tenderness, waiting for me to sleep. The glee in her eyes tells it all. She's the one who has eased me first from her inside to incubating blankets, and all has become relative. I am in belief of her role. The mellowing of her lumpy muscles is probably in the next learning stage. To lull the innocent who have yet to develop depth is a cinch. First comes air, then warmth. Oh, very nice. And from the perspective of the baby in this photo. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. Always really fun what you got to share for us. Always a surprise. All right, so that's going to wrap up the open lines for tonight. Let's go to the Sciku really quick. And the Sciku this week is based on an article from the, Michigan State University. Try to get on the screen. It is this. A study raises the possibility of a country without butterflies. And so really it's one of those, you really wish it wasn't true and it wasn't a news story we're sharing, but it was a story I was thinking about and saw earlier this week. Butterflies are disappearing in the United States, all kinds of them, with a speed scientists call alarming, and they are sounding the alarm. And so this is a compilation. Butterflies are the most studied and categorized group because there's so many, I guess, lepidopterists, like butterfly enthusiasts, who chronicle and count butterflies across the country. So there's 76,000 surveys in the United States that this group got to look at from the last several decades. And sadly, the abundance of butterflies has fallen by 22% across the 454 species counted. Almost all types of butterfly are really fading fast. If you read the article, it speculates a little bit and assumes, based on other studies and other research, that it's mostly due to the use of pesticides, and especially prophylactic pesticides that aren't even necessary. Just in case the bugs come, they kill those butterflies that aren't harming anybody. It's really sad. And so anyway, that is the article for today. And the haiku that generated is this. Really one of the saddest moments of my life. Okay, this is what's left of the butterflies migrating on the grill. What's left of the butterflies migrating on the grill. A monoku. And this was one time I was driving up to Wrightwood, where the Fontana and San Bernardino down there is at like 1,000 feet. You got to go all the way up the mountain, 5,000 plus feet to get to Wrightwood. And in the canyon, I just drove at 55 miles an hour, racing up that canyon through this swarm of migrating butterflies. They're just all over the place. It was terrible. It was so sad. I had no idea. I didn't see them coming. So anyway, that is my guilt poem about that experience. All right, so that is going to wrap up the show for this week. Now, the prompt for next week is the following. Write a poem that references small talk in a big way. And so Katie's off in the room. I'm not exactly sure why she wants to reference small talk in a big way. I don't know if it has tied into anything. I'm not a great small talker. I find small talk so boring that I can't even participate. So, but I love real conversations, as you can tell. So it's going to be interesting to talk about small talk, but in a big way. A lot of ways to take that prompt. That is your prompt for next week. The guest next week is going to be Stephen Gibson. Now, Stephen's been in Poet Respond a bunch. He submits all the time, like pretty regularly to Poet Respond. Had some wonderful poems there over the years, and also one poem in issue number 61 of Rattle. I was somewhere. Where was I? Oh, Joe Barkett had a reading, and so I popped on, and Stephen Gibson was reading from this new book, and it sounded like a really great book. It's Frida Kahlo in Fort Lauderdale. So since he's been on before, I asked him if he'd be on to share his new book, Frida Kahlo in Fort Lauderdale. A whole bunch of paintings. And interestingly, Frida's artwork has just gone into the public domain, which I think might be why he had to publish this book with all of her art. There were a lot of it included in it. So it's really fascinating, ekphrastic poems based on Frida Kahlo's art. So we'll talk about all that. That's Sunday, March 16th, Rattlecast number 285. The prompt, once again, is write a poem that references small talk in a big way. It's going to be the regular time on Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.